Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at B2B World, and with me are Farouk Fatafi and Raja Faisal. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the economic outlook of the country, and especially, of course, given the fact that the first quarter of the standby arrangement is complete and we have the negotiations between the IMF and the caretaker setup already beginning, with, of course, this also reviewing the performance that the government has made with regards to the targets set in the SBA in the first quarter, and, of course, with the next tranche for the remaining 2 quarters as well. It's going to be, of course, important with reference to what is going on in the current situation as well. But we have seen positive developments such as that of the Pakistan Stock Exchange crossing the 53,000 mark, and this is something that has happened after a gap of 6.5 years. So this news is, of course, encouraging and has been reported extensively by international media as well, talking about how the economy is on the right track given the kind of measures that have been taken by the caretaker setup. This is, of course, important with regards to where Pakistan is heading, especially in the upcoming general elections, as to how the situation is going to be and who's going to be leading the country towards the path of economic progression. And then, of course, given the current situation as to how important it is for us to be able to secure the next tranche of the IMF as well. At the same time, there is a lot of interest and a lot of commitment towards bringing in foreign direct investment in the country, and, of course, attracting the business community in the country, for which, of course, previously we've also seen that the SIFC was established. However, there also has been a report by Prime claiming that perhaps the kind of objectives that the SIFC actually had, or the kind of attractions that were expected in terms of monetary benefit to the country, will be difficult to achieve given what so far has been the progress, and also in terms of whether or not these structural reforms are actually going to be targeted, and domestic development is something that needs a focus as well. So we're going to see whether or not there is going to be increased focus and increased priority towards these areas as we go further. Of course, other developmental projects such as those in Balochistan and the rest of the country are also important in making sure that as we move ahead, there is, of course, more and more certainty towards the economic indicators of the country. So we're going to take a look at all of this in the show today and try and understand what the situation is as of now and where we are headed. Of course, Farouk and Faisal are going to be part of the discussion, but we've also been joined online by our guest, Dr. Mahmood Khalid, who's a senior economist, and Mr. Ashraf Malcolm, who's also a senior journalist, and we will be joined by Dr. Sajid Amin, who's also a senior economist, shortly in the show. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion. And Dr. Mahmood, let me start with you, given the current situation and the fact that this is a very important time, especially given the discussions that have started with the IMF. I want to see how exactly do you see the situation at the moment in terms of what our targets were, what sort of position are we in front of the IMF, and what they will be actually looking for in the 2-week-long discussions.
Quarter had been remarkable in the sense that the targets which were set for the performance on different indicators which were agreed upon between the Minister of Finance and the IMF had been met, especially on the part of the fiscal side. They have actually posted a primary surplus which was over and above the committed value. And on the other side, the tax revenue has also been remarkably well. And the agreed upon commitments on reducing the subsidies element has been matured, and they have basically cut down on the tariff subsidies on the electricity and others. But on top of that, if you look at the overall economic climate in terms of the macro figures, that has also actually improved. If you look at the external sector, our trade gap has actually shrunk. And the commitment which was made to the IMF related to reducing the disparities between the market exchange rate and the interbank exchange rate has also remarkably gone down. And because of good management practices, I would say, on the foreign exchange company side by the SBP, the exchange rate has also come down. So, especially if you look at the production side, the large share manufacturing index also shows that there is some positivity. And by the virtue of having a good season on the crop side, we are also expecting good crop on the cotton side, and especially when we go on in terms of the wheat sowing. So we are expecting that the things would be better off. So both in terms of the commitments to the IMF and the overall macroeconomic environment has considerably improved as compared to the outgoing fiscal year.
Right. Mr. Ashraf, when we see the situation at the moment, it's also, of course, important for us to be able to take into cognizance the efforts that have been made by the government to make sure that we are in the position that we are today, and of course to be able to move forward positively with this first review. We've also seen good signs coming in from the stock exchange today, and so it means that perhaps things are moving in the right direction, and this is a result of certain policies and actions taken by the caretaker setup. What, in your judgment, has been the performance, especially in terms of the economic situation, by the caretaker setup, and which sort of actions do you think largely have been the reason why this positive trajectory has started?
Yeah, let me say that the caretaker government has a very small period. There's a very short period. We can't say this is they were done in the 1 to 3 months. It's a long exercise. I will give it equally I will praise for the previous governments, especially the PDM government, during which major steps were taken, especially to control the Pakistani resources which being exhausted in the name of subsidies, exemptions, something like this. Now the positive message which we got in the last 2 months during the caretaker government, one of the major issues, they are very serious on the privatization process. Our government entities which has eaten up to the tune of more than $7 billion. This is for the first time in 20 years experience of the business reporting. For the first time, I'm seeing seriousness. For the first time, something very seriously is done, starting from the evaluation of the assets of the different entities, especially the PIA, Pakistan Steel Mill. There's some other entities, it's railways, blah. These are major important 3 main entities: PIA, Pakistan Steel Mills, and the Pakistan Railway. This first time, in real term, government is serious thinking to get rid of these sick units. This is the first time that during this government, privatization minister has announced that the steel mill is a dead asset. It cannot be recovered. It cannot be reinstated. This is a realistic approach. Then how to use it? This is being done. PIA is eating up more than 1,000 billion rupees of the Pakistan kitty. Seriously, evaluation is being done. Financial advisor is being hired. So main purpose, the main demand why the MF was there to get rid of these government entities, and they were eating up our revenues. Successive governments, political or non-political government, couldn't improve governance in these entities. Major issue was corruption. Another thing, everybody knew the problem of smuggling on our western borders, Afghanistan and the Iran side. In the last, I will say 30 years, this was the first time that there's some serious check with this imports or exports, both are being checked. Pakistani currency was going to our neighboring countries. Pakistani pesticides were going. Pakistani fertilizer was going there. Pakistani food, or wheat and something like this. Everything was being smuggled. We face shortage every time. Then we have to import. This is the first time we have controlled the smuggling with the positive thing, which improves Pakistani rupees value with the US dollar. And other thing is these things being imported from other side without paying duties and taxes. There were 2 losses. Number one, Pakistani local industry was being hit negatively as smuggled items are being brought in market without taxes. Their prices were less as their imported items. Secondly, Pakistan was not getting any tax. So this is for the first time very strict check has been imposed on coastal side and the border side. This is a very positive thing. Then this is the God-gifted thing. We had a bumper crop in cotton and rice. What is sugarcane? Sugarcane next year, Pakistan is planning to improve something, and with the wheat. For the first time, corporate thought is being given to Pakistan agriculture. This is a major issue. I will say the only 2 sectors which are real sector are agriculture and the large scale manufacturing. So serious thought is being given to the agriculture side in the shape of corporate farming and to the large scale manufacturing. I think this is a positive development, the positive indicators. They are not short. The result cannot be seen in short term, but longer term. I hope this will be a very positive impact on Pakistan economy.
All right. Faisal, given the current circumstances, of course, the situation is still tough in terms of what Pakistan is dealing with and the measures that it still has to take till the completion of the standby arrangement. I want to understand then, given that this is what the situation is today, how are we going to proceed with the kind of large-scale development projects that are needed, and how exactly we'll be able to sustain them as well? And I understand the returns that that's going to bring, but at this moment, can we afford to move in that direction, and is it helping the current status of the economy?
Sana, if we obviously look at the current situation of the economy, of course there are various aspects which they need to be balanced in terms of energy crisis we have been facing previously, and of course now there is a tariff problem. Tariff needs to be fixed for sustainable growth, and of course the investors, they are always seeking the sustainability of the tariffs, so that they know what they are going to get in coming future, and how they are going to price about their products. At the same time, there is an excellent point which was highlighted by Malam Saab earlier, and that is obviously related to the smuggling which was taking place, and largely it was obviously going to Afghanistan, and them products which are going into Afghanistan, smuggled into Afghanistan, they are obviously priced as in Pakistan, and there is no taxation system on it, and of course Pakistan's as a state, it's not benefiting with that trade, with that smuggling. Once the cap is there completely, now we know that there is progress, which a great progress which has been made, but if it's further tightened on that smuggling, then of course what we'll see is that in the coming times, state of course would regulate the taxes and all, and that trade of course would benefit Pakistan a lot in the longer run. And I think this would be one of the points to be highlighted in front of IMF as well when we talk with them on the table. So these all things plus earlier of course Dr. Mahmood rightly pointed out that the crops, especially cotton, is going to be quite helpful in coming times. Of course, we know that Pakistan's industries, especially textile industry, is going to get benefits out of it, and that ultimately would benefit the people at large as well, because more the products and more the industries flourish, more the people at large would flourish, and their economy would run as well, and eventually this Pakistan as a state, it would benefit out of it. But largely I would say right now the steps which were taken by Pakistan and the institutions of important institutions of Pakistan, this should not end here. This must continue, and especially related to smuggling of dollars we saw, which later on, I mean, institutions were very tightened on it, and of course suddenly we saw that the situation, they went calm. Most important thing right now, of course, I mean, yesterday we saw that a date for the elections, it came out, and I mean that to me is very important, because we always say that the economy, if a country has a sort of stability in terms of economy when it has political stability, and Pakistan obviously announcing the election dates, it's an evidence that the system itself is stable enough, and of course the political stability is installed in Pakistan, and of course very soon there will be elections, and in them elections, see this kind of environment in a country, of course it is quite important for the economy as well, and I am seeing that in coming months and weeks we will see that there will be very positive impact on it.
All right. Farooq, of course, the Pakistan Stock Exchange has witnessed a good a development, and this is something, of course, it's pointing towards the country moving in the right direction. But I also want to understand that what that actually means for people on ground when we take a look at the stock exchange and these points, and the fact that we're talking about the country moving in the right direction. There are still people claiming that their lives aren't any better, or that it's actually not trickling down to the general public. What sort of indicators that impact people at large can we or will we be able to see if this is a positive development?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the opportunity. First of all, you used the term trickle down, right? I have massive reservations with the idea. It has never worked. Even those countries that had actually come up with the idea of trickle down have finally decided that for the very poor, they'll have to find other ways for intervention. So this is my, I just wanted to point out that we'll have to actually always keep on focusing on the very vulnerable, and hand-holding is important. But that is not to say that the signs of distress that we were seeing, for example, inflation is a massive one. Then we kept on seeing the dollar's situation. Similarly, you're talking about stock market, although it is a fickle indicator, it keeps on changing its mood very quickly, but still, at least one can say, and by the way, our stock market doesn't have the kind of expanse to cover the entirety of country, right? But despite that, one would say that there is some alleviation of that distress. So that is the first good news that I see. The second one is, of course, regarding the SBA and our efforts at macroeconomic stabilization. So one thing is clear, that while there was a fiscal deficit and while there was a current account deficit also, we have kind of sort of stopped actually helping the deficit further by passing on subsidies, and our commitments to the IMF have been actually on the mark so far. Particularly one concern that we expressed last time when we were discussing economy, Sana, that was gas prices and subsidies there because of the circular debt there. And we have seen that immediately after that program, the next day, our energy minister actually spoke to the media, and he announced that government is revising the base price and other things upward. Now, let us also talk about 2 or 3 things that are actually causing the real trouble in macroeconomic stabilization. The first one, as was pointed out by Malcolm Saab, is regarding the SOEs, state-owned enterprises, which seem not to be working at par. And of course, there have been attempts to actually divest or offload them. And particularly steel mill actually was one case where we tried to do it, and then in the end it ended up not only the court, but it ended up actually changing the regime in the country, right? And the government of Pakistan still has the assets which are all kind of dead. So my humble submission is, we have been hearing all this great talk about divestment, privatization for decades. If I, although Nike has nothing to do with our program or our channel, but if I could actually use their slogan, I would say just do it. and that is the biggest concern here, Sana. How long are we going to subsidize organizations? Malcolm Saab said that they are essentially, they are down because of corruption. That is not the only reason. The fact is that Pakistan's industry, and especially state-owned industry, like steel mill, was established ages ago. The world has changed, Sana. There's so much that has changed. Machinery has changed. Machinery becomes redundant very quickly. And we haven't been updating it. So that kind of units are going to close down. With steel mill, there's something else that is going on. It is a massive piece of property. So I think that in the end, what we are going to look at is people actually fighting for that as well. That brings me to the second point, and that is taxation. While we keep on looking at the way we have been going on with taxation, usually what happens, Sana, is that we end up taxing the people who are already taxed, or indirectly taxing the common man on the street through GST, RGST, or whatever VAT format or something of that sort. You'll have to actually start including the money maker, like property sector, which is a dud, where actually no growth actually takes place. There's no utility of that apart from the fact that you have bought a plot and that's it. Similarly, agriculture. Similarly, retail sector. We have been talking about retail sector, but every time there is some kind of expansion into taxation, we end up actually, losing more money and attention. Similarly, our energy sector as well. When are we going to take care of all these matters? So right now, I think that there are good signs. And finally, I just wanted to talk about a couple of things which are very close to my heart. Recently, the Prime Minister actually headed the body that takes care of BISP, and he was satisfied with the achievement so far. But I think that given that there is massive distress already, the BISP has to actually, if it is doing anything further, or transferring cash, it should advertise that as well. And one thing that was my passion project, that was health card. I think that there were bits of it that kept passing out. So it is important to revive that as well.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Let us also welcome in the debate Dr. Sajid Amin, who's a senior economist, and he's joined us on telephone line. Thank you very much, Dr. Sajid, for being part of the discussion. And we're taking a look at the current economic situation of the country in light of course, the performance of the Pakistan Stock Exchange and also with regards to the IMF review. And a number of things that we discuss, and unfortunately that we always seem to discuss, focus around fundamental structural changes and reforms, and this is something that we keep on hearing but haven't really moved towards. And so I want you to give us a perspective into how is it that when we move ahead or talk about certain areas that we want to achieve things in, can we do that without actually looking inwards in terms of the kind of changes that are required for it and the kind of decisions that are very obvious and apparent from people like yourself and other experts who keep mentioning them, but this isn't something that still hasn't been done. Do you see that certain changes may be on the horizon?
Thank you. I think Farooq has really mentioned many good things actually, that both in terms of the challenges that we do face and the kind of opportunities that we can build on. But coming to your question, I think the one key condition for reforms, we have failed over the last 70 years. Everybody knows it. Will be the elections which are coming. A strong government, if we can have a strong government coming out of these elections, you will be moving towards a very strong fundamental reforms. But if there is sort of a balanced government, depending on, the kind of having high dependencies on the partners like the PDM, you won't again be having any fundamental reforms. So to me, political stability with a strong government is the first condition going forward if we have to have a very strong reform agenda and implement it actually. The second, I think the kind of push factor that we may have this time, which is added factor. Well, we have been having so many economic troubles, the turmoil, but this time really we have touched the low. We have had multiple crises, the poly crisis, the climate change, the political instability, the economic volatility, the traditional friends not coming to help, putting us everything on the IMF, that settle with the IMF, then we will come to help. These are some new things. And that I think going forward, if we go into another IMF program that I see coming after standby agreement, that will be an added push factor to go for those reforms that we have not been able to do it. So I think these two push factors can really make things possible going forward, that Pakistan can move towards some sort of reforms. But a very strong political commitment, I'll again reiterate, will be at the core of this. And at this point of time, it's very difficult to say anything that will Pakistan be able to implement those very required reforms, I'll see it after elections. Actually, I'll be in a position to sort of speak with more clarity. But just one example, if you allow me.
Go ahead.
I think we have also think through what we call reforms. As you know, the Farooq mentioned very rightly that whenever we go on the wholesale tax, we are failing. We are failing because we are doing it for the wrong reasons. We are trying to bring wholesales, formalizing it or documenting it just to extract money. We need to change this narrative, like Bangladesh did, like many other countries did. It is documentation for facilitation, it's taxation for facilitation. But when people see that everybody who is in the tax net is sort of extracted to the maximum, nobody will come into there. So I think we have more fundamental problems that needs to be corrected on the other than those we look apparently.
Yeah, Dr. Sajid, when you say that we need obviously strong political will, and you have talked about the stability, political stability of the country, it can obviously put Pakistan on a right track in terms of economic stability. Do you think that the plan we have or the program we have, it should be a short-term program or a very long-term program? And for that, of course, we have to have political consensus by all of the political parties that no matter what happens in terms of politics, none of the parties would interfere when it comes to Pakistan's economic policies. Am I right about that?
And Dr.
Good
Sajid,
luck.
and Dr. Sajid, I feel that we get lost in these abstractions of political consensus or political will,
Thank
and this is something that we've been talking historically. It's not just something that we'll see after these elections are actually conducted. It's something that we know and we haven't really seen. So how do we sort of navigate through this or bypass this if we can?
Exactly. I think it's a very important point. I didn't say political consensus because I don't see it coming. Everybody has its own politics. It's very difficult to get a consensus. What I mean was that I'll be better able to say that what extent of very fundamental reforms the government will be able to take will depend on how strong this government is. I'm not asking political parties. How strong the government. If there are so many dependencies, you won't have it. Many in the partnership may not like the privatization of steel mills. Many may not like the privatization of Pakistan Railway. Many may not like the privatization of PIA, and so it goes on. So if you have dependencies, you won't do anything. So that's number one. But I think Farooq's question was very good. We don't need to wait it over the longer term. I mean, there is the decisions. Many of the reforms are not mutually exclusive. It's not necessarily that if you are eyeing for a long-term agenda, you cannot do a short to medium-term agenda. To me, what we are working on is that what are those 5 key policy decisions that government need to announce in first 100 days? Set its direction. I think we need to work on it. What will be those 5 key policy decisions? So I think similarly we can really identify, and I think the government, the civil society organization, the think tank, they need to work very closely to identify a very long-term, short, medium, and long-term agenda.
Absolutely, and I'm very glad you said that, Dr. Sajid. But I want to also understand. Unfortunately, we see that the first 100 days, of course, are really important. But we see that this first 100-day countdown actually starts on day 1. There is no preparation before these 100 days as to how exactly this is going to be carried out, which perhaps is the important part, because we get lost in the planning phase when the execution phase should have been started. And even now, as we speak, if we talk about elections, they're just on the horizon, and we don't really seem to be seeing any sort of plan, a tangible action point or a framework towards economic security. So how exactly will we be able to move from no plan to a plan after the government actually comes in power?
And Dr. Sajid, if I could add in, obviously, if we talk about the successful world, I'm talking about the Western world, of course, their political parties, they have their manifestos, and their manifestos, they revolve around the economy of the country. We don't see that in Pakistan's political parties, and if we do see it, then can we see this time around that they will be focusing on economy rather than petty other things?
I think very interesting discussion actually. I don't know about you, but I'm liking it. I mean, the one thing that we are starting, at least, I'm not repeating myself multiple times by the names of institutions because I just speak as an economist here. But now we are developing a 100-day agenda before election. We are working on it, actually, that the political parties should have their 100-day agenda before election. And it should be there in the election campaigns and manifestos. And we hope to bring something before elections coming in there, number one. Number two, I think in terms of the kind of our focus on economy, I think over the last couple of years, I've been speaking multiple times with you and many other forums. I think relatively we are now more concerned economy because we have learned now the kind of sufferings we have had, that if there is economy, if you have an economy, you have a politics. If you don't have an economy, you don't have a politics. And many of our parties are learning, and you see the PDM is the latest, I think. They have learned it, that if one thing that can hurt them is the economy, is the prices, high prices, is the inflation, that will be a big barrier to cross for them, actually. So I think relatively, whoever comes in the government, I'm not saying ideally, because it will take time, but in terms of relative terms, I think the focus will be more on economy compared to the past, if you compare it. So these two things, I think, if we can do, I see a relatively good focus on economy and in terms of consequently on the reform agenda. But we need a very clear focus. What does it mean by reforms in Pakistan?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Sajid Main, for joining us and taking the time out. Dr. Mahmood, I'll come back to you. Given the current situation, of course, and previously as well, bringing money in the country is, of course, extremely important and has been a priority. And so we see the formation of the SIFC to attract more investment in the country, to bring in the business community from around the world, and to, of course, seeing these numbers flowing into the country. I want to then understand, in the time that has passed, how do you view the SIFC's performance, and what do you say about what Prime has also spoken about in terms of whether or not the real focus, as we were discussing earlier, is there in terms of structural changes, structural reforms, or also the kind of domestic community engagement that needs to exist. And even if that's not there, do you think that we are actually succeeding towards bringing in more FDI in what we've seen so far? As a body, you think SIFC is going in the right direction?
Well, to be very honest, SIFC is not a kind of a forum where the reforms or the strategy or the vision is actually developed. It's more of a kind of an implementing setup where they're trying to facilitate all those processes which, because of some bottlenecks, have been kept out. Like, for example, thinking of getting an NOC or maybe getting some permissions for doing some construction and other activities. So that kind of
window operations
facilitation is there. Exactly. But I would agree to what Dr. Sajid Amin has said. SIFC can actually multiply their outcomes if such a reforms agenda is also provided to them in terms of making certain fundamental decisions. But I would basically like to add here that before we conclude on something that as a potential reform we should carry it out, we have to go some bit deep in terms of what kind of processes would be involved. Like Dr. Sajid Amin has talked about, that what are the key reforms which we need to make. Within that reforms, we have to understand that what are going to be the fundamental pillars which we have to actually improve. I'll give you a quick example. Take the taxation side. We always blame ourselves that we are basically not paying enough to run the overall economic activity, and that's true to an extent. But if you go deep, then the problem lies within the taxation policy, where we are trying to get everything in a way which is actually creating distortions and creating incentives for the ones which would like to stay out of the system. The withholdinization of the system, going into more import-based taxation. So that kind of reforms have to be also provided in that overall structure where we have to start. And within all these reforms, actually the civil services reform is the key, which can actually start like a domino effect on all the other policy reforms which can be made. It could be related to the capacity building. It could be the use of even the AI-based tools for our decision making. And on top of that, as Patafi has mentioned earlier also, that we need to protect the most vulnerable group, but we have to actually give a thrust in terms of wherever the bottlenecks are, whether it's related to improving the conditions of SOEs for privatization, or whether it's the tariff rationalization, all things have to be done. So if you look at the performance structure, I would not blame SIFC because, again, as I said, that it was basically on a one window type of operation, as Faisal has just mentioned. And that only works if all the fundamentals or at least a trajectory is set in the right path. So we have to basically work on that before we can actually get to see the actual outcomes. But overall, to date, the decisions which has been taken there or the kind of facilitation has been provided, that has been, I think, substantial.
Yeah, Dr. Mahmood, very quickly, earlier obviously you mentioned about the taxation. Do you think that the real estate sector is taxed rightly? If not, then what should it be done against it?
The problem with understanding the real estate is that everybody looks at the investment in actually the real estate. And the main reason for that has been that it has been allowed to be developed like that. Like I give you a quick example. Just recently we held an economic festival in where we discussed all these things. There we actually proposed a very simple reform. If the FBR, instead of asking for so many types of bad taxes such as thinking about the deemed income, thinking about the capital value taxation on a very high rate, the FBR rates, the DC rates, if they can only put up a web portal where every property gets notified before it is actually transferred to the second party. So that can actually reveal the true value, because the people which are going to post that property on that website is going to be fearful that somebody else is going to give a 10% more value. So that kind of reforms needs to be there before we actually start even thinking that it's there for us to collect. We have to actually design the right kind of taxation principle or a kind of a reform which can actually help us get that taxation which we are thinking about. Similarly, it's for the retail sectors and the other, until unless, as Sajid Amin rightly identified, that we really consider that what kind of problems they actually face. We did a small survey in which 99% of the retailers said that they absolutely had no clue in terms of how to file the returns and what kind of the structures are there. So just thinking that we are going to go and grab that amount is not possible.
Yeah. Right. Thank you for that. Mr. Ashraf, I'd also like to take your input with regards to how the SIFC is being viewed, because another criticism that's emerging is the involvement of military within this particular sector as well, and whether or not it's actually benefiting the SIFC or is acting as a counter effect. And I want to understand, given the fact that the COS, of course, has also played a very important role in the kind of commitments that we've seen from friendly countries, do you think that this particular aspect is a matter of perception, or what is being talked about in the media? Or do you think that essentially this element within the body is benefiting the FDI in the country or otherwise?
So thank you very much for asking question on this topic. This is a very favorite topic to criticize or to praise, whatever you can say. This let me say something which I can give you news. This is for the first time that something being is ensured with the consistency. Dr. Saab was pointing out there is no consistency. One government takes some certain decision, other government comes and they reverse it back. Now this is a CFC. This is a CFC which is ensuring that every action or decision is taking, it should not be reversed. There are two important agenda items which are many times discussed in the CFC. Number one was privatization, number two was FDI. In both sectors, Pakistan is notorious for that. When any investor comes to Pakistan, he is disappointed. Mostly disappointed. Even a friendly country, very friendly country, which wanted to invest $10 billion in Pakistan in a refinery, there is no progress in that sector. We are looking for the investment, but when an investor comes here, we don't help him. For the first time, this is being ensured, whether it is a recording project or this is other projects. The forum which is being discussed, and the IMF also objecting on it, the presence of the army in the CFC. The forum is ensuring most facilitation and consistency of the policies the policies or decisions should not be reversed with a change of government, and this will not happen in future. Any decision, whether it was taken by the PDM government or is being taken by the caretaker government, cannot be reversed in the coming government, which will be established after the election. And another important thing which I'd like to point out here, the taxation system. Mostly people, we have to develop culture to pay taxes. Yes, I agree. This is a very difficult system to be a filer, but this is a very easy system on the other side, which FBR have to do. We have to push FBR to more ahead to do it. We have a technology. FBR has each and everything. Today, as per my information, FBR has given a commitment to the IMF that they are bringing 1 million more taxpayers in the net through the technology. They have all the information through banking transactions, through telephone bills, through their sale and buy proceeds. They have all information with the use of technology. Just send them a notice. This decision was taken in the by the previous government, was never implemented. Now, today they given commitment to the IMF, today's meeting, that with the use of technology, they are giving a notices to 1 million people with their record, showing their bank transactions and their other proceeds which they sell and buy. The main issue is we are not documented economy. The investor or wealthy people are taking advantage of it. Another thing, our political parties should have to rise from their political interest. One party, which is a major party taking place in next elections, is supporting traders, community and retailers because they are the vote bank. They should come out of that. They should be taxed. They are not taxing because they are supporting one party. Another political party is the Pakistan People's Party. They are against the privatization. So they have to come out of that. They have to think above their political interests. They have to think about the economy, about the Pakistan. There is economy, there is politics, there is everything. If our economy is not doing well, then everything will be stalled.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Ashraf, for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Memon Khalid, for being a part of the debate as well. Farooq, with reference to what was being discussed by Mr. Ashraf as well, it's important, of course, who really is going to be forming the government moving ahead as well. And of course, we know that the SBAs is being looked after currently by the caretaker setup, and most likely will be completed by them as well. Yeah. Then there is, of course, the elections that are just around the corner. And whenever we see a change in power, there is also this economic bump that is felt, and other bumps as well with regards to what is going on. How exactly will this progression then, as to what we're thinking and what we have identified as what needs to be done, will be affected by this particular change? And how exactly then can we ensure that whatever it is that we'll see in the future also complements decisions of the past?
Right, Sanam. I think that, of course, every party is going to come up with their own approach to how policies are made and how things are done. So that is something that you cannot actually take away from them. But thanks to, regarding this bump that you were talking about, or for that matter, a crater that is created by every election. Yeah. I think that thanks to the elements that we kept on complaining about, FATF, FATF for that matter, and also IMF. Because they have been hammering on and they have been asking us to do more and more and more, and eventually we did many of those things. The state of Pakistan has more controls over things that could go wrong during a transition period, right? So right now, I think that in that context, I am happy that not too many shocks are going to be felt. But I wanted to, with your permission, actually address a couple of things that were said earlier by Mahmood and Malcolm Saab as well. Mahmood was talking about the retail sector and property sector. In property sector, Sana, the biggest money is not merely in investment, it is in speculation. And that actually begins and ends with files that are bought and then rebought, right? No matter what you do, you will not be able to document that in that way possible. But you'll have to actually create laws to ensure that that kind of speculation does not take place, right? If you're just going to create a portal, that won't actually cut it. Now, regarding another thing that was retail sector, let me give you 3 very quick examples. Pervez Musharraf took over the country, the idea he came up with was a voluntary, registration and estimation. Every retailer was asked to fill in a form, just a form, and the government of Pakistan will take care of everything else. Do you know what happened? They shuttered down the entire businesses for days. Then People's Party actually committed that we are going to add to VAT system, value added, so that you get documentation at every level of value addition. It was called RGST. That also amounted to shutting down of Karachi market because of Judia Bazaar and all that. And in the end, they had to actually lose the minister as well.
Yeah.
And finally, recently we saw Miftah Ismail actually came up with taxing the retail sector. And what happened? He was publicly asked by the heir apparent of that party to take that decision back, and he had to take it back, right? With that kind of interference, with that kind of circumstances, I think that we, if we are going to just listen to these things, these are excuses and nothing else. SIFC, you were talking about the biggest, news that I heard, that things are at a level that almost everything is done. The only sticking point was regarding arbitration.
Okay.
We have Imran Khan had actually decided we are going to go for the local arbitration, but the investors demand that there should be an international arbitration of sorts.
Okay.
So that is one thing that is actually impeding, but it is going to be cleared. And I think that SEZs, all these things are going to blow up, and they're going to have great worth. The fact is that we have to start documenting and take things seriously. Right?
Absolutely.
And People's Party is, Asif Ali Zardari actually spoke to press, and he said something very interesting. When they were in government, privatize. So this impression that they're against it is gone.
Right.
So now, just the one liner.
We're hardly out of time.
Just the one liner. We need to focus on IT sector, emerging technology. Sell ideas. Sell ideas. There is no raw material. The only raw material is the
Absolutely.
students
All right.
and the
That's
Give you
all that
another
we have
very
time
important
for.
story about
Yeah.
this. Imran Khan Sahab actually went for digitization. He brought somebody from Google, and that lady actually started introducing mobiles.
Right,
Yeah.
we can carry on after the show, the rest of the discussion. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.